I had the privilege of spending 7 years of my 11 years time here in Kenya with Father Louis Shea, a dear and very good person and friend. At the moment, I'm in Kenya partially to visit his grave, where I offered a rosary and then said Mass with the novitiate community for him. He visited me in California. His cousin came, we had Mass together, and I got his blessing. It was hard to see him because his face was a little bit disfigured from cancer operations, and he came in on the plane in a wheelchair. But the same indomitable spirit was there, and as always, he was just happy and generous and filled with God's love. I remember Louis at the end of a day being dead tired and sitting in a chair and the rosary kind of slipping out of his hand. I want to get my rosary in, and that typifies him, a man of great and deep prayer. I went there in 1993 and they made me superior right away, and I said, well, that's not so good, sight unseen. But Father Louis Shea and Father Thomas Heath welcomed me as no one could. And we had wonderful times together. On Sunday nights, we'd cook for one another. Father Tom would come in with his one recipe of spaghetti and say, another culinary triumph. And he'd put down the spaghetti marsala onto the table, and we'd all laugh at him the same time, but every time he did it. I was a little bit more adventurous, but Father Shea was a good cook and always provided us with something very interesting and nutritious and wonderful. I would have humorous times with Louis Shea as he would tell stories about the Second World War, and one of his cousins who worked for, what was that company that made sights and things, what was that? And I'd always chime in with Honeywell. He said, that's it, and he'd be able to go on and finish the story. He loved his stories of going up north in Nigeria, and his one story about the noise from the Muslim mosque across the way. On Sundays, the mosque would turn up its speakers, and while the Catholics were having Mass, would try and just blow them away with noise. One Sunday, Louis had the Mass, and at the prayer of the faithful, Louis, in a nice loud voice, prayed for the Emir, who of course was Muslim. And a Muslim was passing the door, and he heard Louis pray. And the next Sunday, the speaker was turned down. Wonderful little moments of Father Shea reaching out to others. I was in Kisumu. Father Louis Shea had just inherited a number of students from a brother that had been providing for school fees. And then he also had another segment of school fees coming in from the British, from England itself. Martin Button there was a person who spent much of his time going around the schools collecting money for school fees for children in Kenya. And Father Louis always took care of these people. He had a program where he would help our workers save money, and if they had to borrow money for a project, he'd have them borrow it from themselves and pay interest. So after borrowing their own money, they'd end up richer with a bigger bank account. And he would take all of their money and put it in our account so it would get the absolutely highest rate of interest. And of course, he was absolutely trustworthy. He had a great devotion to the Blessed Mother, and always would be saying the Rosary, of course, and would love to go to Marseille. There's apparently a shrine there that he really, really loved. But he also described to me the time he was there, and he was walking across a bridge, and someone hailed him and came real close, punched him out, and stole his money from him. So it just the various things that happened. And then the bus rides up north in Nigeria, the illnesses that he had, the kind of rough and ready life of a missionary, and Louis was always there. He had a double entry pattern of bookkeeping that no one could understand. And when he'd go away, he'd leave the books with me. I wouldn't even touch them. I would take the bottom line, Louis, give me the bottom line, I'll account for that when you come back, and you can translate it into your arcane way of bookkeeping. And that always seemed to work. And he said, oh, it's the easiest thing in the world, it's wonderful. But no one could decipher it. And there he would be, hour upon hour, this very, very neat hand, doing the books for the people of God, and really looking after and taking care of people. He would go anywhere to give a retreat to priests or sisters or anyone at a moment's notice. It's just who he was, what he did, and loved to talk about the Lord and about the wonderful and humorous and interesting things that happen to us as you travel about speaking about the gospel. I would rarely have breakfast with him because I hate garlic. And Father Louis every morning would take whatever was left of the dinner the night before and put it in a frying pan with 2 cloves of garlic and then 2 eggs on top and cook that up. And the fumes would be there all over the place. I just loved to sustain him for the day with a wonderful breakfast. Father Shea also took a keen interest in the overall health of the people we loved and served. And when AIDS was raging in its first major outbreak in Kisumu, he figured out that he could maybe help some people who come to him. And at that time, there was no retroviral treatments or anything else. And he put together an elixir, we called it, his own, because he swore by things like honey and natural foods. But this was honey, vinegar, and garlic. And he would give people this elixir, and he would also give them a full spectrum of vitamins, maybe just 4 or 5 pills, but he'd spread them throughout the month so they'd have a full effect. And by golly, he got some people who were sick really back to work again. And it really sustained people in a very, very difficult time. Just another sign of his love and caring for the people he served.
You have looked into my heart. You know everything about me. You see my deepest thoughts in every corner of my soul. Each single step I take, and all my words before I speak them. Every place that I have been, and every place that I will go. I cannot hide from you. You know me all too well. There's no story of my life that your memory could not tell. I can ride the morning wings till I'm completely out of view. Whether in dark or light, I cannot hide from you. Long before I drew first breath, you already knew my secrets. You watched as I was formed, out of sight from human eyes. Your spirit is with me, and I am always in your presence. When I sit and when I stand, when I sleep and when I rise, I cannot hide from you. You know me all too well. There's no story of my life that your memory could not tell. I can't ride the morning wings till I'm completely out of view. Whether in dark or light, I cannot hide from you. Turn my heart from wicked ways. Search the whispers of my mind.
Father Louis arrived in Kisumu Tuesday evening, December 22nd, after a several-day journey from Chicago. 2 days after returning from a month-long tour of the U.S., visiting relatives, friends, and benefactors, Louis wanted with all his determination to return to Africa and to Kisumu, and amazingly he made it. He has 2 neck tumors, one not noticeable, but the other a large protruding tumor that stretches from in front of one ear, which was partially removed and closed by the earlier surgery, down towards his shoulder or armpit. This large tumor stretches his skin, pulls his jaw down to the left, which makes speaking and chewing and drinking difficult, and is the cause of pain to him, for which he is taking several times daily pain medicine. It also makes it hard for him to keep his head erect. Louis admits that he needs to rest more and tries to get 10 hours of sleep daily, 8 at night and another 2 in an afternoon nap. Even eating tires him out because of the strain it exerts on his jaws. He can only eat diced foods or soft ones like mashed potatoes because of his jaw problems, and because he had 6 teeth removed as a result of his cancer surgery, which took out a significant amount of facial bone and replaced it with muscle tissue. He mentioned that 2 weeks ago he suddenly developed incontinence, for what reason he doesn't know. He's currently suffering from diarrhea and has accepted gracefully the need to use adult continence pads. His neck problems and general weakness have precluded his driving, but he is already going up to his office in the bus house to learn a new computer program, put the accounts back in order after some months of indiscriminate assignations and withdrawals of funds, and is trying to teach our new accountant his system of accounts, books, and investments. We hadn't thought to put him on the priest's mass list as of yet, but today, Christmas Day, when Father Martin hadn't appeared by 10 o'clock sharp to preside at the community mass, Louis sprung into action, began and presided the mass, preached standing for 20 minutes, and distributed communion.
In you, oh my God, I place all my trust. Yes,
The first night back after his 8-month sojourn in the U.S., he commented, as we were talking about what things he would be able and not be able to do, "Well, I've always said, do the best you can and leave the rest up to God." That seems to be his general tenor of life, now as always. Then at one point about 10 days ago, in a matter of 4 to 5 hours, he came down with a high fever, which gave him a terrible feeling of chills, and I found him returning to the house from his office about 5:45 p.m. in normal weather, shivering, walking with baby steps, and mumbling about being so cold. Dr. Gale was here, and we called the sisters from the hospice, and 2 of them came over fully equipped within 5 minutes, giving him a double intramuscular injection of wide-action antibiotic, plus fever depressants, and within a half hour or so he was feeling much better. At the same time, that day to the next, he developed an open sore on his left temple opposite his ear, where the skin graft had closed off the ear canal and where the skin was being stretched by the tumor. We watched with him that night, but then decided that the time had come when Louis would best be in the hospice for his own best care, since none of us friars present at the time had any medical training. We talked with Louis about it, and he wasn't very hot on the idea, but accepted to sleep there. coming back to the house for prayer and meals, to use books and things in his room, and work at the office during the day. At the time Father Louis began living here, fortunately not a great number of patients, so they were able to give him that entire large room as a private room. Knowing that he was still working in the office, they set up a little table for him, an easy chair to make more comfortable, kind of like his own room in our house. And the back door of that room leads onto the chapel. And that chapel is where he celebrated Mass every day. After the first few days, we discovered that it was too difficult for him to walk over to the chapel on the other compound. So we began coming here every day for Mass. And when he became finally very ill, we just had to open the door, and he had to move only a few meters to be able to be concelebrated the morning Mass with the sisters. So he's warmed up to the arrangement and is spending more and more of his days there. Twice in the last 4 to 5 days he came to dinner at the friar's house, so tired that he did not even begin to eat, but just sat immobile at the table, sighing, for 5 to 10 minutes. Each time I suggested to him that maybe he needed to rest and just go to bed. Both times he insisted on trying to eat, but was just too tired even to raise a fork or spoon to his mouth, and so each time finally accepted. We've begun celebrating daily Mass at the hospice after he almost fell yesterday on his way to Mass at the Friar's Chapel. So in my layman's prognosis, Father Louis seems to be rapidly losing strength and getting slower and slower. Now sometimes just walking from one room to another or taking a glass of milkshake is a big undertaking. But we are finding ourselves obliged to limit his activities and determine some things for him, much as Louis chafes against the bit. Yet he humbly accepts what is put to him in terms of obedience, in order to prevent him overdoing things, risking a major accident, and doing himself in more quickly. But it seems clear that, even with the unexpected ups and downs of his daily status, Louis is fast arriving at the final stages of cancer and approaching the end of his life, though only God can say whether that will be within days, weeks, or even months. February 8th, and 5 minutes after piling into bed when I was still awake, Sister Carol Marie, on night duty at the hospice, called to say that Father Louis had just died peacefully in his sleep. He died about 12:35 a.m., Tuesday, February 9th. The friars, novices, and postulants then gathered there at about 1 a.m. to sing the Salve Regina, pray the De Profundis, and one mystery of the Rosary, Jesus dies on the cross. It was a most serene, starry night outside.